The Delta is a very extraordinary place. It's a unique and wonderful landscape. It is an area of extraordinary resources. It has wonderful agriculture. For example, if you eat asparagus in California, most of it comes from the Delta. It is an area of extraordinary habitat. Our iconic salmon come from the Delta. The fresh water that comes from the mountains and the rivers flows through the Delta to the bay, creates this extraordinary ecosystem, and it is that which is in crisis.
There really is a lot to be said for the community life in the Delta. It is a very special place. Each community has a personality unto itself, and I think there's probably no other place like it. It's something to be marveled, I mean, in the sense that you have this large inland delta. You have some of the most fertile farmland in the world. The wildlife, it is a very active and a very thriving place, and all of us who love and appreciate the Delta want to see it remain as such.
The current proposal is for 2 giant tunnels underneath the Delta.
A pair of tunnels 40 feet in diameter that would route a large portion of the Sacramento River underneath the Delta to the pumps to Southern California.
The fresh water will not flow through the Delta and will be diverted at the cost of billions of dollars, which ratepayers and taxpayers will have to support.
The current cost estimate at what is described as only 10% design is over $15 billion in construction costs. That's enormous. That's one of the big problems with the project economically, is that the cost is completely out of scale with the water supply benefits.
I think Californians have a right to ask a lot of questions about this proposal. It's a multi-billion-dollar proposal. The question is, will the tunnels be good for California? And will the tunnels work?
As it's currently designed, it does not appear that it would be good for the fish that the plan is designed to protect. Just changing the point of diversion occasionally from the Southern Delta to the Sacramento River doesn't solve the fundamental problem that not enough water is making it from the Central Valley rivers through the Delta to the San Francisco Bay and its estuary. The big problem for the Central Valley, Delta, and San Francisco Bay estuaries fish and wildlife populations is that we take too much water out of these water bodies, and the fish and wildlife rely on the natural flows of fresh water. That doesn't mean that people can't take water out of our rivers and even out of the Delta to a certain extent, but science panel after science panel, independent review after independent review, expert agency after expert agency has found that we do not allow enough water to flow from the Sierra to the sea, down the Central Valley rivers, through the Delta, and to the estuary.
Taking a whole bunch of water out of the river system before the water gets to the Delta, if you don't do anything else, it's going to create a situation where the Delta becomes much more salty than it is now. Consequences to agriculture, consequences to the fisheries. Conversely, if they, at the same time they're taking water and putting it into the tunnels, also putting water into the Delta to make it fresh, you haven't created more water. In fact, you may have less water available for export to the south than you do now. If you could come up with an alternative that was less costly, didn't cause the harm that a tunnels project would cause to the Delta, you'd get a bigger bang for the buck.
My view is that the tunnels are not the approach. There are shortages that are real, but that just building tunnels and putting, this massive infrastructure in place, it damages the Delta. I believe there's better ways to invest our dollars and our time and effort, and that we ought to set the tunnels aside and move forward, with an effort that really has a plan for California that delivers more water, that gives us that water security, and protects the future for all of our communities and doesn't sacrifice one community over another.
Well, the Delta is the crossroads for water in California. It's an essential and important part of the water system in California. These 2 tunnels will cost billions of dollars. So the question is, how much will it cost? Will it be cost effective? Will the water that is pumped through the tunnels justify the extraordinary billions of dollars of cost for the tunnels? And who oversees all of this? Who will decide whether this project moves forward? Will the voters have a say? Will the legislators have a say? Will the ratepayers and the taxpayers have a say? It's unclear that any of the answers to those questions are really satisfactory. It's important that we have oversight, and it's important that everyone in California, not just those of us that live in the Delta, but in California, be able to ask those questions. And at the end of the day, the real question is, will there be enough fresh water left to preserve this extraordinary ecosystem? That question needs to be answered.